Happy Easter. Good morning. Welcome. I'm glad you're here. So now we gather. We gather to give each other love and to give each other courage. We bring perhaps hope and joy. Perhaps we bring fear and sorrow. We welcome you. We welcome everything that you bring imperfectly because we're all human. And because this is Easter, let us roll away the heavy door that entombs our souls. Shall we be warm spring sunshine for each other? Shall we renew our pledges to life, to love? Shall we repair our promise that all shall live in justice? Shall we resurrect the heaven on earth we know is possible? Here may our spirits come alive again. It's good to be together, and it's easier to come alive together than to be alive alone. Welcome.
Good morning and happy Easter to everyone. I am Diane Kennedy, and I want to welcome you to our All Souls Indie Gathering. All Souls is an inclusive congregation where we do our best to live the elements of our covenant. We celebrate the inherent worth and dignity of ourselves, each other, all people, and all other living things. We put love in action by forming community, helping those less fortunate, and working to aid the environment, and taking care of our cats. Reverend Joel is going to be talking this morning on the interesting notion of being a Christian atheist. We'll get to that later. Like all souls services, we can bring our whole selves to this one. I recently read a book on how connection may be the best way to combat depression. All Souls is a place where we can reconnect with our values and connect with a support system of community. I was thinking about it, and there are at least 10 people in this church I could call at any time and say, I need help. Everyone here can develop those connections. We will have virtual connection cards available later in the service. There's chatting during the service, and we have a virtual coffee hour after the service. Now, Reverend Joel has a couple of things that he wants to say.
You create a wonderful community together. You create many Easters throughout every day of the year. Grateful for what you created for each other and for people who have yet to find you. Two big things are happening in the congregation right now. One is the pledge campaign is wrapping up. So if you haven't had a chance to get your pledge in, let me know, or let Rick and Mary May know, or even Nancy in the office know. We'd love to get that wrapped up and keep this excellent ministry focused on the future and the good work the congregation does. The second big thing is that your congregation is just about to begin the search process. And that search process will begin with calls to everybody in the congregation about asking if there's someone you would like to nominate to serve on the search committee. You may have some great ideas for somebody who could do that really well. You may not have anybody in mind at the moment. Nobody pops up immediately. Take a little time and think about that. Who do you trust? Who would serve the congregation as a whole really well? Who works together on a team well? And who do you think might have the time for it? It's a great opportunity and a great service to your congregation if you serve on the committee. Look for those calls. They'll be fun. It's a great chance to talk with folks. Even if you just don't have somebody to nominate, look for the call. They're fun, and we look forward to catching up with you all. We light our chalice now. Elias Kahn Clark lights our chalice this morning.
Okay.
Love is the spirit of this church, and service is its law. To dwell together in peace, to seek the truth in love, and to help one another. This is our covenant. Thank you, Elias. Good morning again. When I told my massage therapist that this week's sermon was going to be on being a Christian atheist, his response was predictable. How can anybody be a Christian atheist? I explained that a Christian atheist could be somebody who follows the teachings of Jesus, but doesn't think that there's a God he's the son of. And although I'm no biblical scholar, it's my understanding that many of the teachings of Jesus are parallel to the precepts of other major religions. As a matter of full disclosure, I have not considered myself to be a Christian for many, many years, and neither have I considered myself to be an atheist for almost as many years. For me, Easter is a celebration of the renewal of the natural cycle, the coming of spring. I hearken back to the more primitive origins of the season, such as we celebrated earlier today, this morning. I am energized by the increasing sunshine, the blooming of flowers, the budding of trees. It renews me. I am eager to hear another Unitarian meaning for the holiday. Thank you, Reverend Joel.
Good morning, everyone. For those who might not know me, my name is Sarah Cannon, and I am your Director of Children's and Community Programming here at All Souls. And I see some of my friends from Makerspace here with me this morning. I'm so glad to see you today. Today is Easter Sunday. We celebrate this holiday because it's part of our fourth source, Jewish and Christian teachings, which call us to respond to God's love by loving our neighbors as ourselves. That was something Jesus taught us to do. While Jesus is the person on whom the entire religion of Christianity is based, you might not know that throughout his life, he was a Jewish man who believed very deeply in Jewish teachings and scriptures. Jesus was also not a rich man. He was not from a powerful family. He was a peasant, an ordinary worker from a little town called Nazareth in a region known as Galilee. You can see it here. It's only about 6,183 miles from All Souls. No big deal. Here's a closer look. Nazareth is between the Mediterranean Sea, the one that kind of looks like a flying duck, and this smaller body of water over here called the Sea of Galilee. And Jesus was a small town guy, but he became dangerous. Not to average everyday people like you and me. For example, if you were in Spirit Play with Kathy and Jennifer for our Sermon on the Mount basket this year, you might remember that when grown-ups didn't think Jesus should have to put up with having young children around, Jesus set them straight. Of course, little children should be able to come to him. A lot of ordinary, everyday people came to hear him speak wherever he traveled. They liked him, and they liked what he had to say. But his preaching caused problems for the Roman Empire. You see, before Jesus was born, the Romans invaded the land where his family lived. They put a man named Herod in charge. Like most of the people in that land, Herod was Jewish, and he was often referred to as the king of the Jews because the government in Rome really had made him a kind of king. He did everything he could think of to make the land he ruled more like Rome. He built Greek amphitheaters and Roman bathhouses and made people speak the languages spoken in Rome. He rebuilt the Jewish temple in Jerusalem, all fresh and new, but he built it to look like a Roman temple. And he put a big gold eagle, the symbol of the Roman Empire, on it. So a lot of people didn't like Herod. After he died, his 3 sons split up his realm and ruled different parts of it. But there were so many conflicts and problems that Rome sent a new governor. No more kings for the Jewish people, they said. The Romans would run things themselves from now on. So you can imagine how well the Romans liked it when Jesus preached that the land where he lived belonged to the Jewish people, not to Rome. There were Jewish priests and leaders who weren't very happy with him either. You see, if you were Jewish at the time, there weren't a bunch of different temples you could go to and pray. There was that one special temple in the city of Jerusalem and traveling to it was a big deal. When you got there, the first courtyard you entered was kind of like a mall or a market. You paid a tax, a fee to come in, and then you would spend money or borrow it from the money changers, who were kind of like payday loan companies are today, to purchase an animal that the priests would sacrifice for you. Now, the idea was that doing this would wipe away your sins, your bad deeds, and make you clean. The bigger and more impressive the animal, the better. But as you probably guessed, bigger animals were a lot more expensive, and most people couldn't afford them. Jesus didn't like this. When you hear stories of him curing the sick or blessing people, he did that for free. And he made a point that it should be free, that blessings were a gift from God. They're not supposed to be something you have to buy. If you were someone who made money off of all the buying and selling at the temple, you probably didn't like Jesus very much. And over time, he got even bolder. In fact, he rode into Jerusalem like a king, very much on purpose, and the people around him treated him like one. They laid down their cloaks for his mount to walk across. They waved fronds from palm trees the way people had done for the Maccabees, heroes you might have heard about when you learned about Hanukkah and faith formation. He went to the temple with his followers and he flipped over the money changers' tables and let all the sacrificial animals go right in the middle of the city. They caused a huge ruckus. Authorities from the temple arrested Jesus. They handed him over to the Romans. The Romans punished him for being a rebel against the Roman government. And you can see that Jesus was one. He spoke truth to power. He encouraged people to stand up to the Romans. He did this even though he knew he would be punished. We know that because he told his disciples so, his followers, ahead of time. And the Romans did a terrible thing, something they did to anyone who rebelled against the Roman Empire. They crucified Jesus. They hung him from a cross made out of wood with a sign at the top that said King of the Jews to explain who he was and what he was being punished for. And they left him there until he died. As you can imagine, Jesus' friends and followers were very sad. And even though most people who were crucified weren't allowed to be buried, somehow they were able to take Jesus away and put him in a tomb. But, and this is the mystery at the heart of Christianity, the Bible says that 3 days later, they came to the tomb and his body wasn't there anymore. The heavy stone in front of the tomb had been rolled away. And some of the books in the Bible say that his friends and loved ones saw him after that. And he wasn't a ghost or a spirit, he was alive. And then he went up to heaven, alive, to be with God. I think we can all understand, if we stop and let ourselves really feel it, what it must have been like to love Jesus and lose him. We all have people we love and would grieve for. And it must have been very sad to see a good person be cruelly punished by the Romans for standing up for his community, for his faith, and for what he believed was right. So to see him alive again and well, that would be a miracle, an amazing gift. You might think it's a little bit strange that the symbol of Christianity is a cross, since a cross was the very thing that was used to harm Jesus. But the truth is that cross is now a symbol that even though the Romans did a bad thing, they could not stop or silence Jesus. You can see how that's true, whether you believe in the God of the Bible or not. The Romans could not take away Jesus's goodness or his followers' memory of that goodness. A whole lot of the Bible is stories about Jesus that people wrote down after he died. Some of them knew him and some of them never met him at all, but they were all inspired by him. And there are still people in our church and other churches today who think about Jesus and ask themselves, would I do the right thing even if I might get in trouble? Do I love the people around me, maybe even people I don't know, enough to take that risk? That's a very good question to ask ourselves on Easter and every day. Thank you.
As many of you know, Easter Sunday is a day where there's usually lots of music in our sanctuary. It's so enjoyable, and there's so much great repertoire out there. Since we are not able to be in person, Jane Alexander and I recorded some things for our service this week. The first piece we're going to listen to is a piece by the American composer Samuel Barber. Barber wrote this piece in, I think, the early 60s. He wrote a series of songs that he called hermit songs. The texts are all from 13th century Irish scholars and monks. And this text is a poem called The Crucifixion. Interestingly, the piece is very short, but Barber is a composer who is known for his use of unusual harmonies. And that means on the piano, usually lots of black keys. But for this particular piece, he only wrote the piece with the white keys. He didn't use any chromatic tones. And that makes it a somewhat interesting listen. And we hope you enjoy it.
At the cry of the first bird, they began to crucify thee, O swan. Never shall a man cease because of that. It was like the parting of day from night. Was the suffering borne by the body of Mary's Son? But sorer still, to him was the grief which for his sake came upon his mother.
Good morning, All Souls. Today I have a very specific joy to share with you, and that is our sunrise service that took place this morning, and we have a couple pictures from that on the next slide. It was just an absolute joy to be able to meet with 5 or 6 congregants, 6 or 8 congregants this morning, and to just talk about transformation and to plant seeds together, and to listen to music together and to gather around a fire together. Yesterday was our spring family celebration, and that was also just a joy of hope and renewal. There are a few concerns of health concerns and sorrows that we in our congregation currently you can find in our hearts, thoughts and prayers section of the order of service. But I just wanted to highlight some of the things that are happening that just make me feel like life is springing again. Spring is coming, the flowers are blooming, and we can once again be in community soon. Thank you.
In the tomb of our soul, we carry secret yearnings, pains, frustrations, loneliness, fears, regrets, worries. In the tomb of the soul, we can take refuge from the world and its heaviness, sometimes a comfort, sometimes escape, sometimes preparation for life, renewed, rejoined, sometimes breaks us apart from life. Sometimes the tomb is a gift of a little time to really understand what it is that hurts, and perhaps to learn how to heal what we have harmed. Sometimes the tomb only numbs us. We're trapped. It breaks the web of life that connects us. In this season where light and dark are in balance, let us be a balance of light and caring dark for one another. Grateful for the darkness that nourishes us, let us push away the stones that trap us. Grateful for the light that awakens us, let us reach out toward the light in one another. In this time, perhaps more than any time we've ever known, an unknown future awaits us all. May the lights of our lives bring us to a deeper love, a greater joy, and an understanding of where the darkness heals and where it separates us. I invite us into a moment of silent meditation. For all that we bring, known and unknown, growing and hidden, may we find the blessings of community and know the great web of life and the love that is possible within it. Amen. So be it. Blessed be.
Spirit of life, come unto me. Sing in my heart all the stirrings of compassion. Blow in the wind, rise in the sea. Move in the hand, giving life the shape of justice. Roots hold me close, wings set me free. Spirit of life, come to me, come to me.
This reading I offer you this morning is from Peter J. Gomes. He was for many years a Harvard professor of religion, and he was a chaplain at the university's Memorial Church. He died about 10 years ago. Professor Gomes was known as one of the finest preachers in the United States. He came from deep roots in African American Baptist churches. Gomes was Republican, openly gay, and a black man. And he was most controversial, believe it or not, for his scholarly work on the Bible. The New York Times once wrote about Gomes and then quoted him as writing, "The Bible is not a single book. It isn't a single historical or philosophical or theological treatise. It has 66 books in it. It is a library." He explains in his last book, The Scandalous Gospel of Jesus, what he means by this. "I write with the radical suggestion that we use the Bible to go beyond the Bible, to embrace that to which it points, the gospel, the good news. In a time when it is easier to write about doom and gloom than hope and promise, I suggest that Jesus came back into the world not as a Bible teacher, not directing us into a text. He came back as one who proclaimed a realm beyond a text, beyond the Bible. He proclaimed his good news against the conventional wisdom of even his day. He took up with unacceptable people, advanced dangerous, revolutionary ideas."
This next musical excerpt is from Messiah, which we hear a lot around this time of year and also at Christmas. This is a section that's often sung by tenor, but can also be sung by soprano that we prepared for you.
Thy rebuke hath broken his heart. He is full of heaviness. He is full of heaviness. Thy rebuke hath broken his heart. He looked for some to have pity on him, but there was no man, neither found he any to comfort him. He looked for some to have pity on him, but there was no man, neither found he any to
I loved hearing the organ and the music this morning. How wonderful to, it's going to be so wonderful to hear it when you're all here and the sound reverberates through the sanctuary. At the moment, when I sing alone, which sounds better than just hearing the silence in the sanctuary. So it's Easter. Happy Easter. A complicated holiday for us, Unitarian Universalists. And I have to tell you, if there are 75 Unitarian Universalists on this Zoom call service, I know for a fact there are at least 76 belief systems at the very least. Because at the moment, I'm both a theist and an atheist. Don't ask me to explain that, I can't, I just am. And I might change my mind at any moment. I haven't for some time, but the gift of being a Unitarian Universalist is I don't have to worry about that. I just have to be authentic to myself and to my soul. It's Easter, so there are Unitarian Universalist Christians celebrating Christianity's most holy day of the year. Among us are Jews also, who celebrated Passover just this week. At sunrise this morning, some of us gathered in an earth-based spirit and welcomed the promise of spring and the reawakening of the living web of life that sustains us. We have such diversity of spiritual paths in our congregations. It's a challenge to practice this shared faith. In one congregation, there can be some folks who follow a spiritual tradition that feeds their souls deeply and brings them great joy, and that same tradition for dear friends in their congregation can cause discomfort to those friends. It's part of being a Unitarian Universalist. Perhaps it's actually part of being human. So years ago, before the internet had 1,000 answers for anything you wanted to know, a man stopped by the church I was serving. He heard that even an atheist like him could be a member of the Unitarian Universalist Church. So he came in and asked if I would talk, and I said, sure. And he asked me, I hear I could be a member of your church. Does that mean we can believe whatever we want? Well, I said, we all have beliefs. And on any given Sunday, you'll find more beliefs than people. And then I told him that I was both a theist and an atheist. He was very amused by that. I suppose he thought I was confirming his sense that you could just believe anything you wanted. I said, even on the days I'm mostly a theist, I still don't believe in a literal heaven. I mean, harps and wings, and I don't think that's real. That's me. But I think there are values to the old stories, just as stories. They're useful to get me thinking, I find. So, for example, I can imagine I've died and I've arrived at the pearly gates of heaven. I don't believe in any pearly gates of heaven, just to be clear. But in the story in my imagination, I've come face to face with God, and at that moment, two old white guys like you and I, we will see God, and we will be surprised because she is African American and gay. He laughed at that, he liked that. But when I stand at the pearly gates, she's not going to ask me, so Joel, did you believe in me? I mean, really, why would an all-powerful, all-knowing God care at all whether I believed in her or not? Beliefs matter, I said to him. Many things matter more. In my imagination, God would ask me this, so Joel, how did you live your life? Is the world a better place because you lived in it? Now, when I went to theological school, I was not a theist. I described myself as a humanist. I was raised in the Unitarian Universalist Church in Columbus, Ohio, congregation that blessed my life, gave me the things I most cherish about myself. Didn't learn much about Christianity in the congregation at that time, but I was curious about it. There were people I loved who built the meaning of their lives around their understanding of Jesus. And I struggled to understand why that was comforting. The God they cherished seemed to be in a rage at everyone all the time and could only be happy if somebody died on a cross. And I didn't understand that. So in my first class in theological school, I went to a Unitarian Universalist theological school, and I got to take a Unitarian Universalist class on the New Testament, specifically a Bible class about Jesus. The textbook for the class was titled Jesus the Jew, written by a Jewish historian. I was absolutely floored. We learned about Judaism, the pagan religion of the Roman Empire. We learned that Jesus was a rabbi. It says in the Bible, he was a rabbi. He was a wandering healer. And that was actually a thing in those days, rabbis that went around the countryside healing people. And it's pretty improbable that a wandering rabbi healer would intend to start a new religion. We also learned that the 4 Gospels in the Bible were not written by anyone who ever met Jesus. They were written down maybe 40 years after Jesus was executed by Rome, probably more like 80 years, 90 years. And there are at least 36 Gospels that were not put into the Bible. In fact, they were banned by Imperial Rome, and centuries later, we discovered many of them hidden in interesting places for us to discover later. The history is fascinating. But even more fascinating for me was the Jesus I was discovering. This guy named Yeshua. He spoke Aramaic, wandered among the people of the land, comforting the fearful, healing the sick, and subversively twisting the propaganda of the mighty Roman Empire. A dangerous thing to do in those days. And Jesus never claimed to be God, but he did carefully encourage anyone who would listen to him. There's another empire besides that one. It's the empire of heaven. Interesting that it's usually translated as the kingdom of heaven, but more accurately, it would be the empire of God. Quite a counterpoint to the empire of Rome. I was floored that this empire of God was an empire led by children, widows who had no way to care for themselves, but the generosity of their neighbors, birds and animals, people who you weren't supposed to have dinner with. The empire of heaven was an empire meant to cherish all souls, not just some souls. It didn't quite click for me yet, but I was fascinated. I was reading, though, the Bible as Dr. Gomes later suggested it be read it as a library. Jesus was teaching kindness. He taught peaceful resistance against the tyranny of an empire that had invaded his homeland. But then there was the moment I hit this one passage. Jesus was teaching a crowd of people, and he said, when the wind blows from the west, which is off the Mediterranean Sea, it's going to rain, right? When the wind blows from the south, which is off the Sinai Desert, it's going to be hot and dry, right? And then you all are hypocrites. You refuse to see what is happening right now, right in front of your eyes. And then he says, think for yourselves. Think for yourselves. That's exactly what I learned in Sunday school. That's a humanist, the atheist in me was like all over that. Yes, thank you. Kind of wish that I was a theist for Jesus, because I would like to have him come back right now and say that to a lot of people, but well, it's what I learned in Sunday school. In fact, that's what All Souls teaches in Sunday school right now. Let us think for ourselves as we care for and love one another. Now, I want to tell you, if you're visiting and you're checking us out, none of this turned me into a theist. That's another story for another time. I became a theist. I stayed an atheist. As I said, I can't explain that. I don't have a great philosophical treatise about it. It just, this contradiction that lives in my soul. Jesus became vital to me, though. I learned from other atheists in Unitarian Universalist congregations who were followers of Jesus. This was not unique to me. There were others. Think for ourselves. Allow the children to come and be among us. They are the most important treasures we have. Refuse to be humiliated. Refuse to participate in an empire that harms others, to the best of your ability anyway. This religion was not the religion I'd been hearing about, this religion of Jesus. And in fact, then I later read the words of Ralph Waldo Emerson, a Unitarian minister who in the 1830s and 1840s wrote about his views of Jesus. He wrote that he was not interested in the religion about Jesus. Emerson was very interested in the religion of Jesus, the religion Jesus taught. You don't have to believe in a God to appreciate what the radical rabbi was teaching and doing 2,000 years ago. So I think of myself as an atheist Christian. Jesus compels me with his revolutionary words, his being a comforter of the children, of the poor. His prophetic speeches for justice still ring out in the hearts of all people all over the world. I find so much spirit in what Jesus taught, even after these many books of the Bible were edited and re-edited, and some of the words were changed. You can always tell the words that were changed. You can tell what Jesus really didn't speak and what he did. They're very distinctive, very powerful. I find that they go right to the heart of loving the world, of feeling courageous, and not rolling a stone over parts of my heart because I don't believe in the right way. Actually, it was when I read the words of Kurt Vonnegut, who grew up in this congregation, that I really began to understand this was very possible. Vonnegut, also an atheist, who wrote that so much of what Jesus said is absolutely beautiful. What does it matter if he was a god or not? The Easter story is the story of how Jesus died. That part's not easy. He was executed by Imperial Rome. As Sarah said, crosses were reserved only for those who were considered rebels against Rome. His body was put into a tomb after he died. The next day, when the women apostles went to the tomb to anoint his body, they found the stone had been rolled back. Not an easy thing. It was huge and heavy. They looked into the tomb and Jesus was gone. In the earliest telling of the story, they run back to tell the men apostles, and they don't listen. Women, they say. Kind of embarrassing. Guys, come on. It takes them days, weeks, some of them months, some of them years, to understand what was happening. Jesus appears and reappears to them. His teachings still live in them, urging them to build the empire of heaven, the empire of loving kindness. It took a long time for them to understand they needed to roll away the stones of the tombs in their own hearts and spirits, because Jesus was still alive in them. I see sometimes that folks celebrate the one moment of the rolled away rock and declare Easter. But as the story is told, and I understand it, Easter's happening all the time. The people who followed Jesus had lost everything. They were in deep grief. They'd followed Jesus at risk of their lives, left their homes. They'd followed a barefoot, wandering preacher, rabbi, healer. But his memory was so strong, still strong, across crazy editing of that library, across the need of many empires to co-opt what he said. It's interesting. Later, Jesus would be called Lord, Redeemer, Liberator, Savior of the world. It's interesting that Caesar Augustus at the time was called Lord, Redeemer, Liberator, Savior of the world. When the followers of Jesus called him these terms that were legally reserved for Caesar, this was an act of high treason. We always struggle, we humans, with empire. Empire struggles in our own hearts, doesn't mine anyway. How do we get caught up in empires that call us to war, that call us to disconnect ourselves from others, call us away from love? The empire of compassion is right here among us. Jesus reappeared to his followers, not literally in a body, not as I understand it. It's a story. As one of our great theologians of the 19th century said, Theodore Parker, it doesn't matter if Jesus ever lived or not. What he taught is what is transcendent. It would have come to us another way. The spirit of his love reappears over and over again. The morning after he died, his most trusted apostles, the women apostles, sat vigil at his tomb, sensed his spirit alive in them. And then later, two students eating a meal realized he was alive with them, there on the journey. We know the feeling, all of us, of a gaping emptiness of our souls, an empty tomb, bereft of our beloved. When we see it and roll away the stones, something can be born there. Light can shine in. We may not know what it will be, and it may be a journey to find out what will be born there. But we share with our spiritual ancestors that human experience of Easter, when love and life comes again, is reborn in all of us, when we allow it to speak through us. Easter happens again and again. It happens every day if we roll the stones away. The promise of the holy then brings new life, new hope. The time will come, perhaps not in our lifetimes, but the time will come when the empire of heaven, one run by children and their needs, the one guided by the wisdom of our grandmothers, is the one that always lives in our hearts, calls us to live wonderfully in this world.
Thank you, Joel. Each week, All Souls shares the cash or specifically earmarked donations collected on Sunday to another organization that shares our values. This week, those funds are going to go to the Damien Center. The Damien Center was founded in 1987 by Earl Connor, an Episcopalian minister, with support from Christ Church Cathedral, which is an Episcopal denomination or entity, and the Cathedral of St. Peter and Paul, which is Catholic. It is now the largest aid service organization in Indiana, and it helps more than 4,000 people each year through clinics and counseling, a food pantry, housing assistance, support groups, and other services. In ministering to a marginalized community or an often marginalized community, it shares our values. Let us now take time to complete the morning offering.
How beautiful are the feet of them that preach a gospel of peace. How beautiful are the feet. How beautiful are the feet of them that preach a gospel of peace. Bring glad tidings of good things. And bring glad tidings of good things, and bring glad tidings of good some go starved and hungry, who plead for work and health. Once more give us your challenge above a noisy day, and come to lead us forward along your holy way.
We all know loss and pain. We all cause hurts. Let none of that divide us. In the rising sun today, let us do together what none of us can do alone. Let us roll away the stones that close our hearts. Go in peace, be in peace. We will gather again.